All right, hey guys, it's TJ, and I've got your lesson this week on patience because that's the fourth fruit of the Spirit in our Fruit of the Spirit series. I hope you're memorizing this verse, Galatians 5:22 and 23. Patience is the fourth fruit because the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And you see here that I've got a wonderful looking pineapple. I'm going to emphasize the looking. You'll get to find out why I say that here in a second. But waiting is not easy. I don't know if you've ever read the book by Mo Willems. That's been a staple in my household over the summer. But waiting is not easy. And the reason we're talking about waiting is because the pineapple takes longer to grow than just about any fruit. I don't know if you've done any research on this or you've been growing pineapples in your backyard randomly. I don't know. But it can take a year to 20 months to grow one of these things, right? So it doesn't take a whole lot of work, but it takes a whole lot of patience to actually finally get this thing out of the ground and eat it, or trees. I didn't really read that far ahead, so I don't know what happens with pineapples. The reason because the reason I said it looks delicious is because I cannot stand pineapple. I actually despise it. All right, I don't put it in with other fruit. So you people that make fruit bowls and you've mixed your pineapples in there and it's touching the blackberries and the blueberries and whatever else, stop it, okay? Because I don't even like the pineapple juice. I've been to Hawaii. I tried it. All right, there straight from Hawaii, and I was like, nope, not doing it. I do not like it. So here's what I would say. So something that takes over a year to grow, I'm out. Forget it. This doesn't even seem like it's worth it, because I don't think it tastes that good anyway, right? Here's the deal. We're talking about patience, right? That's how we usually respond with stuff we just don't want to wait for anyway, right? We're horrible at waiting. We don't want to know really what the end result is, sometimes, because we just kind of give up, or we do want to know what it is, but we get so caught up in the waiting, we get so anxious that we just don't wait really well. And so that's what we're going to look at. We've got all kinds of things to wait for too, especially if you're looking at this past maybe 5 months, right? You're waiting to hear from a school. You're waiting to hear from a college, whether you got in or not, or you're just waiting to hear from the school district on hey, am I going back to class at some point, right? Thankfully, we're back in school. Hopefully we're not going to be, shutting down on all these different things. Sometimes we wait for someone to be healed. We wait for someone to be transformed. We want this person to just change their behavior. We have to be patient with this person, right? All of it, right? All of that equates to waiting on the Lord, or just being patient. And that's what we're going to look at. Patience shows that there's grace in waiting. And how we're going to do this, if you've been following along, hopefully you have, we've been looking at different characters all throughout the Bible. My first one I talked about love. We looked at the father and the prodigal son. Today we're going to look at the story of David. I'm going to approach it a little bit differently because we're actually going to look at Psalm 13. But I want you to understand just exactly what's happening in Psalm 13, right? Because it actually kind of comes from 1 Samuel 26:20. And so what's happening is that David is being pursued by Saul in the mountains. David has been anointed king, right? He was anointed king around 12 years old. And so now what he does is he has to wait around for 20 years to become king, right? It's who would want to do that, especially if you've read through the story of 1 Samuel and you've read about the story of King Saul, and you're just man, I cannot believe David waited that long, right? During this time that his predecessor, King Saul, he tries to kill him, but you see all of this, and you're David killed Goliath. He won a bunch of other battles. He's like a favorite among Israel, and he still has to wait to become king. And so if I'm David, I'm sitting there going like, are you sure that like I can't just become king now, because like I've done some pretty awesome stuff, right? And that's really not how this works out. I mean, why not just start your own kingdom at that point, right? Like, what's the point of waiting if I'm like, look, I can just take a bunch of people with me and start our own kingdom? That's not who David was, right? We know that he was a man after God's own heart. And so let's look at Psalm 13. If you got your Bibles, follow along with me. We're just gonna look through this, and basically it's all application. How do we wait? Like, what does waiting actually look like? And I want to challenge you to do some things along the way. So Psalm 13, 1 and 2 says this: how long? That's how David starts this. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? I'm reminded of like riding in the car as a kid. Like, how long is this going to take? How long until we get there? How long until I can get out of the car and stretch again? Right? That's kind of what David's doing here. So my first thing I want you to understand is just pray. That's how you can wait. That's what David's doing here, to go like, well, it sounds like he's complaining, and you could say, yeah, maybe a little bit, but at least he's getting something out there. Like, he's kept the lines of communication open. And so what happens is when you begin talking, no matter what it is, right? Prayer is a conversation with God. We have heard that and taught that our entire lives in church. And what we're reminded of here is, like, even if you're frustrated, tell God. He at least wants to hear that. And what it does is it begins to change your posture to listen and to hear what God actually has to say. Right? David feels forgotten. That's why he repeats himself over and over again. Like, God, hey, do you hear me? He's like the kid in the back seat, right, on the car ride. Like, hey, do you hear me? Like, when are we going to get there? And your parents have basically just been like, bro, I got the headphones in and I'm not listening right now. That's not what God's doing. God's listening, right? I mean, you've probably felt this way. You've probably felt this way recently. And it can feel like God's not listening to you, or feels like that you're just being ignored. But at least you're not ignoring him, because you've just continued to present those requests. And I promise you, God is faithful to listen and hear and to answer, but he's going to do it in his own timing. That's what happens here with David. So the first thing is just pray. At least get that all out of your system. Even if it's just out of frustration, or sometimes it's not that way. It is a time of rejoicing and praising, or it is a time of just maybe just asking some questions, of just trying to get some clarity on some different things. That's okay. God wants to hear those requests. So be presenting those to God. Let's keep reading. Psalm 13, 3 and 4. It says, consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice, because I am shaken. Next one is this: is just hit reset. Sometimes you got to hit reset, right? I talked about this. We're horrible at waiting. We're horrible at just being patient. And so what happens here is David shifts his mindset. And I talked about this a minute ago. Like, when you open up the line of communication and you're talking to God, your posture begins to shift a little bit. Your posture begins to change in more of a position of listening. And that's what happens here with David. And so he starts asking God. He goes, hey, will you answer? Will you answer me? See, David's not forgotten about God. He's aware now that, like, oh wait, God's not really left me. God is here with me. God is right here, right where I am. And so David's like, hey, I just want an answer. I just want an answer. And here's the deal: it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel to feel frustrated and to feel sad and to feel like you're not being heard. But there's a proper way to ask, and that's what kind of happens with David here. You see, as we'll keep reading. But he's now in this humble posture. Look at what he says. Consider me. Like, would you even consider answering me? It's like, going to a higher authority, a figure, or David's supposed to be king, right? And like he's put himself in a position of like more of like a peasant, of just like, hey, I have a request. Will you at least even think about this? He's no longer demanding an answer. And he's showing us that there's a proper way to wait. And look what happens in 5 and 6. So you've got to pray, hit reset. And look what happens in 5 and 6. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. Last one's this, is rejoice. Rejoice. Like there's a worship that happens when we wait. Verse 5 is the key verse here. Like David remembers, he begins to fall back on and remember God's steadfast love for him. That's what he's drawing from. And so David's heart is turned towards God's love for him. And so he rejoices in salvation because he knows God will answer him. And he knows now that he's going to be rescued. You know why? Because he's been rescued time and time and time and time again. And he remembers who God actually is. And he's there to rescue him again. He exchanges his how long for thanksgiving. Like I said, there's a proper way to wait. And waiting, when you wait well, waiting is a powerful testimony to others. You think about all the different people, maybe those who don't even know who God is, or they have trouble just figuring out whether God is actually real or God is actually listening to them because maybe they're going through some sort of tragedy, maybe they've lost a loved one, or maybe they've become sick. And you're able to go, hey, let me just tell you about who God is. Let me just show you how we can wait together, and I will wait with you. You can enter into the trenches with some of those people who have faced some really, really tough times and hardships. And you can show them that God is faithful to answer prayer. See, we get so caught up in the waiting, and God puts us in his waiting room on purpose. It's how God is going to just really work on us. We've looked at the last several months with COVID-19 as like, what is God doing in all this? Wow, this is so ridiculous. We just want to go back to school. We just want to open up the church. We just want to whatever, right? We've heard all the complaints, okay? Could it be that God just put you in his waiting room just because he wanted to work on you? Could it be that God put you in there because he was just trying to get everybody's attention, especially yours? I don't know, like the overarching theme. I've been working and wrestling with this entire time of like, what is really God teaching us? But I know this, he's teaching every one of us individually. And that's what we really need to be focused on. God puts us in his waiting room so that we can be transformed. It teaches us dependence. It teaches us to turn our hearts towards him when we don't have answers and we don't know what's going on. So don't get caught up in the waiting that you really forget the end goal. Don't give up. Don't be like me when it comes to the pineapple, where it's just like, yeah, I'm out. I'll forget that. That's right. Because it's the patience where we see grace in waiting. Patience is grace in waiting. So every time you see this pineapple, right? Every time you see a pineapple at the store or whatever else, be reminded of God's patience and how we can respond to him.